YouTube. This is Greg Ward with the Common Law Rights Society. We have a special guest tonight on Common Law Rights Society Presents, the infamous Adask from the Anti-Shyster Magazine and many great freedom-fighting movements throughout the years. He comes to tell us about his stories with the man and not animals, or man or animals argument. And so we're really excited to have Al come on the show tonight. So without any further hesitation, here we go.
Hello, Greg.
Hey, greetings, Al.
I didn't hear you call earlier.
Yeah.
I was sitting there, but I didn't hear you call.
I didn't. Well, it looked like it was calling, but it wasn't doing the same thing it just did just now when it called. So
Didn't make the noise.
exactly.
Yep, didn't hear anything. So,
How's it going? How's things been?
oh, I don't know, that's such a strange question to ask a man at my age. How have they been? Kind of mind-boggling. And maybe they've been that way all my life, but I'm just beginning to recognize it. But we live in curious times.
Well, I have a list in front of me and a whole different bunch of stuff that I wrote out. I wanted to just I thought about asking what's been going on, but the last thing I had written was, what do you think about the current political and social climate? And I think that you're just touching upon that right now.
Well, everybody's touching on it. I mean, it's not an original observation, but this is the first time in my life, and I'll be 74 in a few months. This is the first time in my life when I'm actually wondering if civil war is a possibility in this country. And that's something that I would never have imagined that I would ever imagine. And yet the way things are just piling up, and people on different ends of this political spectrum, they are so filled with anger and hatred, not all of them, but a lot of them, the ones you hear from or you hear about anyway, that they will not listen to what anybody else has to say. They just take it for granted. I am so mad at those other sons of SOBs that I don't have to listen to them.
Right.
I mean, it's I don't know what you do with a society where people aren't willing to listen to each other. And it's not a new thing. There have always been people like that, but it's grown predominant to some degree, and it's I don't know, it's just taken for granted. Well, that's the way it is. We can get along with that. We don't have a problem with that.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, it's very unfortunate. I feel like when Obama came in office, at that point, I had felt like people in general were ready for a change, and I don't necessarily think that they received the change that they were thinking they were going to get.
Beware what you wish for, huh?
Right. Well, but then I think the same thing. I think the same thing with the Trump administration. I think people were voting because they felt some urgency for a change, but I think the people were being ready for change. Were ready to go in any direction that they were led down the path of, and I think you could have seen them be brought down the path of unity. And it's unfortunate that I think that we're seeing the opposite.
Well, what kind of change do you think? Do you think there's a common denominator? I agree with you. I think that's a good observation. People want change, but what change do they want? Right? We kind of all agree is a situation where the Republicans say we want change and the Democrats say we want change, but they don't want the same change. Are they motivated by the same impulse that causes them to want change? You get what I'm doing?
Yeah.
There could be a dozen different reasons for change.
Well, I think first and foremost, my feeling is always that people are looking, in general, it seems like people are going to want their families to be safe and secure, and their future to be, again, secure as possible. So if they have a job and their job seems to then suddenly become insecure, then they might vote for the party that seems to bring security promises to that job.
Who's that?
Well, you and I have the same guess, but I'm saying I don't know who that would be as far as would bring jobs, but I think that we're
facing something with robots.
With robots?
With robotics and artificial intelligence and the rest of it, that threatens to render a lot of us obsolete in the foreseeable future. I'm not talking about 20 years from now.
Right.
I mean, this is a thing. This is something that's catching on now as we speak. They're bringing jobs back. You know, we moved jobs overseas with the factories back, I don't know, the 90s. I'm not sure when it started, but it was one for a period of time. And now some of those factories are coming back, but they're not coming back with jobs. They're coming back with robots.
Interesting. Automated.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a situation where people in this country who used to be able to find jobs, you could find a job sweeping floors. Nothing to brag about, but you could get a job. Today we can get a Roomba, one of those little robots to roll around in your,
Sure.
on the floor. And we can do it in the house. I'm sure we can do it in warehouses and the rest of that sort of thing.
True.
Those people aren't going to get those jobs back. What are they going to do? I mean, this is not a situation there's going to be a recovery. Somebody's going to go, wow, I'm going to create more jobs.
Right.
Really?
Well,
you're going to create more jobs at a wage that's so low that it's
Right.
not more economical to build a robot to do the job?
Well, like you said earlier, we have so many factors hitting at the same time. You know, right? We have. I mean, we're on the verge of potentially a economic collapse with the stock market, and right? And then you look at 2008 when you had the bailouts, which were, you know, what I mean, or the economic stimulation, the Q1 and all that stuff, right? But you know, you and I know that money was printed out of thin air, but still borrowed against the debt of the future, right? Generations.
Yep.
So these countries that may or may not buy foreign debt on these bonds, you can't continue to fund a broken project.
You can't continue to go into debt if somebody's not willing to lend you some currency.
Exactly. That's the point.
There's the problem. There's no reason, you know, we have allegedly about a $21 trillion national debt right now, all right? But some people say the national debt, the real national debt, including unfunded liabilities, may be over $200 trillion.
Right.
Now, you could sit back at first and say, oh my gosh, we've got $21 trillion in debt, and what will happen when we get to $22 trillion, it'll all blow up. Maybe we've already been there. Maybe we're already in debt for $200 trillion, and that doesn't stop us. We can still go deeper. And we can continue to go deeper. We can go to 400 trillion. We can go to a quadrillion. There's no limit on how much debt we can go into mathematically.
Right.
But there is a limit on how much people will lend.
Exactly.
And if the lenders bail out and they say, well, I'm never going to get paid on that debt, I'm not going to lend any more money to them.
Exactly.
Once they start backing out, and some of them have already, then you fall back on the Federal Reserve. They have become the lender of last resort, and they're having a problem. They're having a problem. They're trying to raise interest rates, which is good for the Federal Reserve, but bad for the economy and bad for the government. We're coming to a point where we have run out of rope.
Right.
Run out of road. There's going to be a collapse here. There's going to be something dramatic, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know when it is. Could happen this month. A lot of people, I mean, I read articles every day that say, oh, January, it's 2019, it's all going down the pipe. Yeah, well, maybe.
Right.
It might be 5 years from now. I don't know when it's going to happen. But it has to happen.
Well,
I can't see a way of getting out of this.
Right. Well, and it seems like, again, the world economics or the world political, social climate is not one that is privy to, as you said, bailing out the United States.
No, they can't. You know, I mean, the debt right now, the national debt at 21 trillion translates into something like $65,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. Family of four owes basically $250,000. Their fair share of the national debt's $250,000. Family of four. Who's got it?
Right.
Ask your audience. Raise your hand. Show us. Everybody who's got an extra $65,000 for yourself, another $65,000 for your spouse, another $65,000 for each of your kids that you not only have, but you're willing to send to Uncle Sam.
Right.
Raise your hand.
And
I
that
don't see any hands going up.
right. Here's a so this national debt. Who is it actually owed to?
Not, well, it's owed to anybody who's holding on to the paper debt instruments like bonds, government bonds, and it's also, you could include people who are holding cash in their pocket. Green Federal Reserve notes, paper debt instruments. You have to understand that all of these pieces of paper are nothing but a promise to pay.
Right.
They're not a payment. All right? And this is an important insight, at least from my perspective, that most people don't grasp. Most people sit back and say, look, I've got a piece of paper here with gold gilt edges on the paper, and it's signed by some important person, the rest of that sort of thing, and it says $100,000. I have a $100,000 bond, and that makes me a rich guy. Well, you need more than that to be rich, but regardless, you get a stack of them.
Right.
And they think they're rich. And they're not. They've got nothing but IOUs. They've got promises to pay. A promise to pay. That's all a piece of paper. You show me any paper debt, paper financial instrument, and I will show you a promise to pay.
Good point.
Oh, yeah, you can trust us. You give us your wealth. But the truth is, the debt is too great to ever be repaid in full. And when we talk about $65,000 in debt on the national debt, is your fair share, my fair share, and so on. We're not talking about what you owe on your house, on your mortgage, on your car payments, on your college education, and the rest of it. We're not talking about any of your private debt.
Right.
That'll double it at least, maybe more than that. Who's going to pay this? Who can pay this? And that's the point. No one can pay the debt, which means it's not going to be paid. What can't be paid won't be paid. Sounds like a silly little axiom, a silly little statement, but it's axiomatic. We've got more debt than can ever be repaid, which means if you're storing your wealth in a paper format, you got a bond, you got a stock, you got Federal Reserve notes, cash, tucked away in the safety deposit box at the bank, you are taking a great risk. Because most of those debt instruments can't be paid. You may have some of the good ones that will be paid, but they are going to be a minority. My guess is at least 20% of the debt can't be paid and therefore won't be paid. And that's important because it means if the debt can't be paid, then what is the value? They're being treated, these paper debt instruments are being treated as assets.
Right.
Look, I've got a stock, I've got a bond, I got a piece of paper with somebody's signature on it. So what?
Right.
It's not an asset. It's just a promise to pay. And it's in an environment where most of the promises to pay can't possibly be kept.
Right.
Right?
Well,
it means if you give me 10 people who've each got $1 million and it's stored in paper, I'm going to point out at least 8 of them are going to lose their assets. They're going to come to the realization and say, oh my God, you mean this isn't real money? This isn't really an asset? No, it's nothing but a promise to pay. It's a debt instrument. This brings something up that's important, at least an illustration that's important. I don't know how the banks function right now because I'm not associated with any of them. But there was a time when if you had a bank account, when I was a boy and the rest of that sort of thing, if you had a bank account, they still had the dollar was still backed by gold or silver. You'd go to the bank and you could imagine that you're running a store and you're selling flat screen TVs among other things, and you got one that's just what I'm looking for $1,000. I come into your store and I write a check for $1,000 and hand it to you to pay for the flat screen TV. Are you paid?
No, not officially.
You're not. All you've got is a piece of paper, a check, which is nothing more than a debt instrument, a paper debt instrument. It's a promise to pay.
Right.
Okay, so you go down to the bank and deposit my check into your bank account. And the bank takes, and you're not paid then, and your bank takes my check out of your account, and it sends my check to my bank. And my bank looks in my bank account to see if I've got $1,000, and they say, oh my gosh, Adask has $1,000. How'd that happen? All right, they might be surprised, but they
Right.
take the $1,000 and they take 1,000 silver dollars is what they're taking. Although we were fooling around with paper, but it was backed by silver. It was in some and in some instances gold. It goes back to the 30s and the rest of it.
Right.
But they ultimately they are taking either silver or they're taking gold, and they are moving it from my account back to my bank, back to your bank, back to your account, and they deposit 1,000 silver dollars ultimately, or they credit your account with 1,000 silver dollars.
Right.
Right? In theory, you have just been paid when you received something tangible. I gave you a piece of paper with my signature on it. We would move through the banking system, came back, and you received something tangible. Your debt was redeemed with something tangible.
Right.
Who redeems our debts today? When the government issues $1,000 in Federal Reserve notes, who redeems that debt today? Who gives up something physical to pay for that debt?
Well, I mean, you're saying when the government issues it.
Yeah, that's where it all comes from.
Well,
the government borrows the money from the Federal Reserve, and the government then uses it. They lend it back into circulation, all right, or they use it to pay the help. But what it is, it's a promise to pay. That's all the green pieces of paper are, is a promise to pay. And historically, what I was trying to explain with that,
it used to be
story
backed
about
by
the banks,
right.
Somebody's got to cough up something real. You don't just take a piece of paper and say, I owe you $1,000 and say the debt's paid.
Well, that's
the IOU says somebody's got to give me $1,000, and it's not $1,000 in paper.
But that's the question as of what we got today. So they issue these debt.
Let me answer it.
Okay.
Who's redeeming the government's debt? By law. By law. I can't quote the law to you right now. I know it's there, and I can't tell you this. I can't tell you the section and the site and the rest of that sort of thing. The Federal Reserve and the federal government don't have to redeem Federal Reserve notes. They can lend them out, but if you come up to the Federal Reserve and say, well, I've got $1,000 here and I'd like to redeem that for something tangible like, 50 ounces of silver.
Right.
All right? They're not going to give you any silver. They're not going to give you any gold. They don't redeem their debts. So who does? And the answer is you do. And the guy across the street, the people down the block. What happens is, imagine I'm working for the federal government and they pay me $1,000. How do I redeem it? I come to your store and buy a $1,000 flat screen TV.
True.
You give now. I have redeemed the Federal Reserve notes that I received from the government. The cash. I've redeemed that. I got something physical in return, but it's not paid by the government.
Right.
And this is a bad thing because the government is by law able to write all the checks it wants and never redeem them with physical wealth.
Well, essentially,
which means if I could do that, how long would it be before I got myself a brand new pickup truck or a brand new McMansion? Or why not buy a city or maybe a state or maybe a whole country? If I can write checks to people and they accept them as payments for their work, for their property, I can buy their land, I can buy their homes, I can buy their cars, I can buy their lives if they'll accept these green pieces of paper, these debt instruments, these promises to pay, but they never charge them back to my account. I'm not redeeming my notes. Government is not redeeming its notes. Who redeems them? The American people. We are funding this growth in government. We fund it by accepting these green pieces of paper.
Right.
And we do it because I'm willing to get paid by the federal government $1,000 for a week's work or whatever it is, or a couple of days' work or whatever. I'm willing to accept that $1,000 in cash or effectively in cash from the government because I know you're running a little store where you will sell me that flat screen TV for $1,000 so I can get you to redeem the government's debt.
Right.
And you also will take the $1,000 because you know there's a guy down the street who's trying to sell his bass boat.
Right.
And you may have an you say, well, I can get him to sell that old bass boat for $1,000. And he figures, well, there's another idiot. My brother-in-law, he's dumb as a box of rocks. I'll give this worthless piece of paper to him, and he'll give me something. But this goes to what the Federal Reserve. You may have heard this, where they've said the value of the dollar. And the Federal Reserve has made this point: the value of the dollar is completely dependent on the full faith and credit of the American people. They're right, telling us the truth.
Right.
If you will continue to accept $1,000 cash to pay for your flat screen TV, or pay for your old bass boat, or make whatever kind of to pay for whatever it is you're doing, as long as you're willing to do that, this system will continue to function. But if the public ever wakes up and they sit back and say, wait a second, I don't want these. I want a redeemable dollar. I want a dollar that I can get money from the government and or the Federal Reserve. They need to redeem their debt, their debt obligations. They're coming out and say, well, I'll pay you $1,000. No, they won't. They'll give you a debt instrument. They'll give you a promise to pay, but they will never give you a payment.
It's true.
And that's why government grows so big. As long as we keep taking this stuff, we, the people, are redeeming the government's debt. Yeah. Well, it's completely contrary to that fundamental principle I tried to illustrate, talking about I give you a check, you deposit it into your account,
right,
your bank account, blah, blah, blah. Back in the day, you had to redeem it out of your account. The guy who wrote the check had to make that check good, and it had to come out of his account. If it didn't, then there was a problem. All right, I couldn't write a check and charge it to Mary James. All right, she didn't get the flat screen TV. I did. It's got to come out of my account, and the government doesn't have to play by those rules. And it's part of the reason that we're in so deep right now. To my mind, this is a fundamental problem that might be contributing to something we talked about in the beginning. People want change, but change from what? We know something's not working. We know something's not right, but what is it? I think it's the currency system.
Absolutely.
I think that's at least one of the top 2 or 3 causes for we want change. People can't articulate it, but that's what they want.
Thomas Jefferson said, and I know I'm saying something you've known for years, he said if the American people ever allow the issuance of currency to fall into private hands, the banks and the corporations that rise up around them through inflation and deflation will deprive the people of the lands that their forefathers conquered. And I think that's what's happening. You're seeing a concerted effort from 1913 with the coup d'etat, if you will, of the issuance of the currency by the Federal Reserve. I think you're seeing a concerted effort to literally inundate the country with such debt that they could literally foreclose on the property or the rights of the people.
I used to publish a magazine called the Anti-Shyster. I published that for 12 years.
Yeah.
And after I'd published it for a few years, I applied to accept MasterCard and Visa, and you've got to be approved in order to set up a facility where you can take credit cards to pay for subscriptions. All right. So I applied. And I was publishing that magazine out of the spare bedroom in a little duplex I was living in.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent a woman over to look me over to see if she thought I was honest or honorable or whatever she was looking for, or prosperous. And I didn't have any valuable home or anything like that, but it was I just swept the floor just a couple weeks earlier, so it wasn't too bad. And in the course of the discussion, while she's filling out the paperwork, it's just automatic. They want everybody. If you were selling anything, they go, oh yeah, because they wanted their cut.
Right.
They would approve. They wanted their cut on my magazines. They approved that of me for selling using MasterCard or Visa card or whatever in order to pay for my subscriptions on the magazine. During the course, she just made an offhand remark. And she said, well, all the credit card orders, everything you buy with credit card, debit card, whatever, goes through the Federal Reserve. She said credit cards. I don't think she said debit cards.
Uh-huh.
But she said it all goes through the Federal Reserve. And I thought that was a remarkable admission.
Huh.
Because I think the reason is that the Federal Reserve, because it lends currency into circulation, the Federal Reserve continues to own legal title to the green pieces of paper that are in your wallet.
Right.
You get equitable title. You have the right to use them. You have the right to possess whatever you purchase with those Federal Reserve notes. But legal title to the Federal Reserve note goes to the lender. If I lend you a pen,
Right.
and you're using my pen to write what becomes the great American novel, okay, I'm entitled to a cut on whatever you're making. Why? I mean, you used my ink. You used my pen.
Right.
People will walk around and go, oh, that's Greg's pen. That's Greg's pen because they see you using it all the time. No, it's my pen because I loaned it to you.
Right.
And you are using my property to write the great American novel, and now we're going to have to sit down and figure out how much of a cut I'm entitled to for providing the pen. The Federal Reserve, if what she told me was true, the Federal Reserve has legal title to the green pieces of paper in your wallet. And if they do, if you purchase something, they get legal title to whatever it is you purchase. You get equitable title. You have the right to use it, drive it, park it in your garage, pay for the garage, whatever. You have the right of use, equitable title,
Right.
but you don't have legal title. And if you don't have legal title, you don't have standing at law. In court, you only have standing in equity when you're dealing with that property because you only have equitable title to the property. And in equity, the judge can do anything he likes. He has discretion to decide the case. If he doesn't like the color of your eyes,
Right.
I'm going to vote against this guy. Nah, you're guilty. You're guilty. I don't like the color of your eyes. He can do that in equity. Can't do it at law. At law, the judge is bound by the law. So everybody's bound by the law if somebody's got legal title. I think the way the system operates is it is presumed that you only have legal title to virtually all of the property that you claim is yours. You have, I don't know if I said that correctly, but you only have right to equitable title. You do not have right to legal title in most instances. You could have it if you bought land, if you inherited land from a grandfather.
You're right.
Who bought the land, and he actually bought legal title to it back in the, I don't know, probably prior to 1948, but maybe a little later than that, maybe as late as the 1960s. The legal title can pass by descent, but once you mix in some Federal Reserve notes, that legal title has been compromised and maybe forever. Once that legal title falls into the hands of the Federal Reserve, they own legal title to your house, your car, whatever. They'll let you drive around in it, but you got to obey their rules. Why do you have to have a seatbelt fastened when you drive your car?
Do you think it's because you have a driver's license?
No, it's because it's not your car. You have to play by whatever rules are imposed by whoever holds legal title to the car, and it's not you. And if they say you can't drive our car without a driver's license, okay, those are the rules. They own the car. They have legal title to the car. They set the rules. You can't drive the car more than 65 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone. They own the car. They're setting the rules. It's just like being the father of a high school kid who's taken the car and his girlfriend to the prom. You look, you better be, if you know what's good for you, Sonny, you better have that car back here by midnight. Do you understand?
Right.
There better not be any cigarette butts in the ashtray. You better have filled up the gas tank again, the rest of that sort of thing. Otherwise, you're back to riding your bicycle. You understand? I can say that because I'm the daddy. All right? I'm the one who, relatively speaking, for the sake of this analogy, I own title to the vehicle. You get to use it. I'm not going to let you use the vehicle. That's equitable title. In this analogy, I'll let you use it, but you follow my rules. That's why the government can, hey, you didn't fasten your seatbelt, Sonny. You got to pay. You got to pay. Why? Because it's not your car. And I think that's what's going, and I think that's what's happening. And I'm sure a lot of people, if they're listening to me talk right now, they're sitting back and saying, that guy's crazy, I don't think so.
No, I think you make a lot of sense.
I think we're close. I don't know that I understand it completely or perfectly, but I think we're close. This goes to things like civil asset forfeiture.
Right.
All right? Yeah, they can take it away. You're violating the rules. All right? Their rules, and they get to set the rules because they own the property. They can take it. Take your house. Take your car. Why not? You don't own legal title to it.
You
just have equitable title.
I've definitely, in discussion with folks in regards to, like you were saying, foreclosures or different, or just in general, the fact that you have to, you know, you could pay your land off, but if you don't pay your taxes, you know they're coming to get it.
Yeah, I know. Why?
Well, like as you said, I think there's a lack of.
Because they own it. They
Right.
own legal title to it, or let's at least presume that they own legal title to it.
Exactly.
You don't understand. The average person, I guarantee there's not one person. I'd be surprised if there was one person in 1,000 in this country. This is about trust relationships.
I think you're right.
Trusts
Absolutely.
are where you divide. You have perfect title, which means you have both legal and equitable title. You have the right of ownership and the right of use. That's what you have when you have perfect title. You set up a trust. You give equitable title to the beneficiaries. You give legal title to the fiduciaries or trustees.
Right.
They have two different things. One of them gets to use the property that's in the trust. The other one gets to administer it.
Right.
The government is administering that property. They can do anything they want. And if you violate any of their rules, trust rules.
Well, let me.
You violate the rules. Oh, sorry, we got to take that car away from it.
Right.
And we get to because you're being a bad beneficiary.
Let me stay on a similar topic as far as regards to control over, you know, this type of estate trust vibe, but I'm going to take it away from the money and the currency, which I think that you're absolutely spot on point when it comes to when you're speaking on these legal titles and when the use of the Federal Reserve notes. I'm curious though, what are your thoughts on? I know a lot of people that I speak to, they feel like there's discussion of the birth certificate, and that being the creation of an estate entity, and that the use of that birth certificate. Let me see if I can phrase it right. They almost administer these courts and these administrative layers, utilizing this commercial layer, similar to what you're saying with the Federal Reserve notes and this whole thing, but this just a general commercial overlay of creating this kind of straw man birth certificate name and administering your estate, as you're saying, in some kind of probate fashion, right? They're administering, they're making your surety, they're making us surety for the debts and surety for the.
Yeah, that's basic. That's part of what's going on here, in my opinion. They're making, and for example, when you go into court, and the judge says, "Do you understand the charges against you?" And most people, "Oh yeah, I understand. I'm no dummy. I understand that."
Right.
I guarantee you, most lawyers don't understand the charges in the sense of comprehend. But I don't think they're talking about, do you comprehend the charges?
Right.
That's what most people assume. They are saying, are you willing to act as a surety? Are you willing? We're going to take these charges and we're going to dump them on you, and would you mind paying for them?
Right.
You say, "Oh yeah, I understand the charges, Your Honor. I'll pay them. You know, I'm good for it. You know, I'm a good American."
Exactly.
I think that's a critical point. And you get off track here for a minute. Woman down in Houston, I can't think of her name right now. This story goes back 20 years anyway. She was a legal reform activist. Desi, I can't think of her last name right now. And she had a couple of sons, and they were also legal reform activists. And she had one of them that was in court one day on a traffic situation, if I recall correctly. I didn't see this, but she told us the story, and I believe it to be true.
Uh-huh.
And we knew that something happened when they said, "Do you understand the charges against you?" We knew something was going on there, but we didn't know what it was. And when they got to the point in the proceedings where the judge said, "Well, Mr. Smith, do you understand the charges against you?" And he said, "No, I don't understand the charges against me." And then there was a hesitation. Nobody said anything. And her son, just on a whim, just a wild hair, he said, "Do you understand the charges?" Do you understand?
To the judge?
All right? And the judge, according to Desi, the judge just about fell off the bench to get out of the way. He said, No, I do not understand the charges. I don't understand the charges." And they fussed at that for a while, and then they moved on, and they came back to it, and they tried it again, and the rest of that sort of thing. And Desi was telling the story, and everybody, including me, was just laughing.
Right.
It was hilarious. And in the end, she didn't get to the whole story. I don't know how it worked out. She never did say. But it's only an anecdote. It doesn't prove anything. We got one instance where the judge, oh no, I didn't understand. I don't understand the charges. It appears that whoever understands the charges is going to be held to pay the fine or do the time.
Right.
Right? Now, when you ask that judge and he says, no, I don't understand the charges, then in an ideal world, her son should have looked at the prosecutor and said, do you understand the charges, Mr. Prosecutor?
That's good.
And if he says, yes, I do, I understand the charges perfectly. Well, then you tell the judge, well, Judge, here's your surety. You know, give him the fine, give him the time.
Right.
I'm going home to watch TV. That's fantasy world talk. And again, it's only based on an anecdote. I don't doubt that the anecdote is true, so much as I heard of it. But it was hilarious when I heard it. The judge didn't want to understand it. If you could ask the prosecutor, do you understand the charges? And he refused, says, and he's smart enough to say, oh, no, I don't understand the charges. Well, then, Judge, I don't understand the charges either. And I move that the case be dismissed because nobody in this room understands the charges. Fantasy world. It's not necessarily ever gotten anything to do with reality, but I think it might be a true. I think, it might be a reliable fantasy.
Well, very well spoken. Well, as you said, there's a feeling that this is what's going on, and so you see these people come in and attempt to express these things in its various capacities to see if they can get themselves free of a charge, or or to just try it out for experimental sake. But
and what usually happens?
Railroaded and depending on what your attitude is, thrown in jail or something else. But
I don't know that you're railroaded, but the judge is playing by a set of rules, in my opinion, that he knows you and I don't understand. And when he says, do you understand the charges, he means something completely different. He knows you're going to think he means, do you comprehend the charges? And that's not what he means at all.
Right.
He's saying, do you consent to be liable for these charges? That's what we think he's doing. I don't even know that to be true, but I think he's doing that or something like that. But they're playing by a different set of rules. And you walk in and you think, this is the best legal system in the world. I'll walk in here, it's just like Perry Mason. It shouldn't take more than an hour. All right? Whole show shouldn't take more than an hour. We'll go through a little bit of investigation, whatever, and justice will be done, and I'll be free because I'm a good guy. No, we got a different system here entirely.
Right.
And I think a lot of this goes back to the money system. If we had real money, gold and silver coin, that's money, and this other stuff we are using today is currency. And I think it's currency because it does not provide you with legal title. I don't think you can get legal title with the paper debt instruments. I don't think you can get legal title with the digital debt instruments. But the great thing about gold and silver coin issued by the government as money is that it carried intrinsic legal and equitable title.
Right.
If you paid for something with gold, you owned it. You owned legal title and equitable title. You had perfect title to whatever was purchased with gold.
Yep.
When you get these green pieces of paper, you don't get perfect title. You're not coming up with legal title. You may wind up with equitable title, and that's confusing, I'm sure, if people don't understand anything about trusts.
Makes great sense though.
Well,
but you're right. There's a lot of people out there who don't.
Trust law before it even begins to cross your mind. It's like I'm speaking in tongues to most people.
Well, I have an interesting story that again, these things that we're speaking of, as you say, we interpret how we interpret it, whether we're looking at this kind of the overall what we're seeing out here, and then we're also looking at these documents such as the constitutions, right?
Yep.
And so here's something that I gotten into a situation a year and a half ago with a cannabis-related issue in Virginia. And they brought me before the magistrate. And that wasn't my first, rodeo as far as going before these guys in Virginia. And so every time that I'd gotten into these situations, I then found it upon myself to really start digging into law. And on several occasions, I had my Bible open side by side and was just amazed at the feelings that were coming over me and the feelings of revelations coming before me. Anything from woe to ye lawyers, and that that phrase, to just in general looking at the whole landscape of society and seeing maybe the parallels. But that's not the point at the moment. The point was that I was reading the Virginia Constitution, and it said, Article 1, Section 2, all power is derived from the people. The magistrates are their trustees and shall be amenable at all times. And so I stood before this magistrate. I said, sir, may I ask you a question? I said, Article 1, Section 2 of the Virginia Constitution states this, and I read it to him. And he said, and I said, so are you that magistrate? And he stood there, and not only did he not know that the Constitution said that, but he really didn't know the answer to the statement. Really, his final.
No, I understand. What was that? Read. Tell us again what you told the judge. You said down in Texas we have something similar in Article 1, Section 2, Bill of Rights of Texas. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. You said something similar to that out of the Virginia Constitution. What did you say?
I'll read it right now. Okay, so and before I read what I'm going to read, I'm going to also point out what you just read. You stated very specifically the same thing because it's for the benefit of the people, and
which tells us what?
A trust.
That's right. A beneficiary is an attribute of a trust system.
Right.
When they declare the people to be for their benefit, they're saying the people are the beneficiaries of the trust and the government are the fiduciaries.
Exactly.
They get to enforce the trust, but they are not the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries have all the rights. But the question is, are you one of the people?
Right.
That's the question.
Well,
because the government presumes you're nothing but livestock. They presume you to be an animal, and as such, you don't have any meaningful rights.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there because I gotta go to my other next thing. But and I'll get back to the Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. But just off of what you just said, and I was gonna ask you about that because you brought it up last time. I'm gonna read you something right now out of. Excuse me, out of Carlton Weiss's concise trustee handbook, and it's the administration of a common law trust, right? A private express trust under the common law. So we're talking outside of the scope of the statutory jurisdiction that we know may be also tainted, if you will, with these corruptions of 14th Amendment, if you will, or Federal Reserve, if you will, like all these things that we're speaking about, these things that have tainted what presumably may have been our original rights.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Let me read what Carlton Weiss says. He says, a generally unknown fact is that there are several types of citizens now existing in America. The trustees of an express trust may seek protection under the Constitution as state citizens throughout the Union of the States, a jurisdiction outside the scope of the 14th Amendment. And he says, however, it should be noted of all citizenship, 14th Amendment or otherwise, that jurisdiction over natural and artificial persons is distinguished without a fundamental difference. This stems surprisingly from the operation of in rem jurisdiction, which underlies all civil law. And he goes on, he says, though all courts are familiar with the actions in personam against persons, it is the actions in rem against things, which though practiced only in maritime law, stealthily operates in every civil and criminal criminal court. This principle is one of the least understood in its entirety. And the last thing he says is, in rem jurisdiction over a man or a woman can only exist if the woman or man is a slave, property, or res, and you know res is to be property of a trust,
yep,
an object, in which case his or her disposition at law is no different than if he or she were a horse or other goods.
There wherever you're reading from right now with this information on trustees.
I could share the screen, I think.
All right, I'd really like a copy of that. If you can send me a copy by email, is that possible?
Absolutely.
Tell me where to find it or whatever, but I really like a copy of that because it's absolutely confirming things I have been suspecting and talking about for probably 25 years.
I agree.
And I haven't seen that quote before, but that's wonderful.
So, well, I'm going to read you one last sentence, what he says, and then I think you're going to be like, because everything you're saying is right on point with this. He says, then see the Zong, which is a court case, Gregson versus Gilbert, 99 ER Again, I'll send this to you. He says, in nature, in rem jurisdiction is exercised over men and women by their creator exclusively.
Yep.
Governments can only therefore gain a fictional in rem jurisdiction over men by creating various legal devices or personas for those men to assume limited control, e.g., citizen, taxpayer, driver, etc. Since the device is legal fiction, a falsehood made true by force of law, this persona is in fact a legal object or res. And just as in theater, the persona or person is separate from the man or woman playing the part, therefore there may be artificial persons but not artificial men, natural persons but not natural men. And that comes out of American Law and Procedure, Volume 13.
Well, I'd really like to see a copy of that text.
Yeah.
I'd like to get that if that's at all possible.
I got it right here.
I agree when he says you have in rem jurisdiction against things.
Right.
All right? Things include animals.
Yep.
And I've talked about this. I'm sure I talked about this the other time we talked. And it was the idea that I've been sued for $25,000 a day by the Attorney General of Texas under the pretext that I am a thing. I'm an animal. I'm not a created man. Now, I disagree with one part of the statement you just read. That said you said something about the kind of man they were, but once they make an animal out of you, you don't get the God-given unalienable rights declared in the Declaration of Independence. They have no obligation. You're just livestock.
Right.
And that's what the government, and that's, if there's anybody listening to the program say, oh, that's crazy talk, I can give you I can give you law, and I'll get to it in a couple of minutes. You go ahead and finish whatever it is you want to do.
No,
I'll get the law, and I'll show you where it is. No, they see us as animals.
I remember you told me last time. I would love for you to explain to the people what you had found out.
I'll tell you, what you can start with, where we first, again, I was sued for $25,000 a day. That's $9 million per year.
Wow.
All right. And that was what I was facing. I was the seventh defendant in a case that started in 2001. I was added as the last defendant in 2006 because I volunteered to be fiduciary for a guy's trust, and the trust was a defendant. And I thought it would just give me standing to speak in court. And it turned out it put me in a position by being the trustee. I became liable. I became the defendant in this. There were 6 other defendants besides myself, husband and wife and their corporation, a man, his corporation, and his trust. Those were the first 6 defendants, and then they finally added me. And I read the case law, and they had 3 filing cabinets full. This case had been going on for 5-6 years before I got involved in it.
Wow.
All right? And they had the first original defendants, the first 3, they'd hired one of the best law firms in Texas, paid them $160,000, got nothing. It put them into bankruptcy. They got no benefit out of hiring that law firm. They lost $160,000. Yeah, that put them into bankruptcy. The bankruptcy put them into divorce, and eventually they left Texas for parts unknown.
Oh, wow.
All right. But the case continued against Ben Taylor, who was the first guy, who was the second man to be charged in this case, and Ben Taylor and his corporation and his trust. This was a civil case. It wasn't criminal. It was civil. I got in there, and I read the relevant law, and especially read it after I looked at it. Skipped my mind. I'm getting old. My mind doesn't function the way it did when I was younger. But
what was it? The Cosmetic Act?
I read the case, and it said the key to this case. This is the state, the Attorney General's case, and the key to this case is to determine whether or not colloidal silver, and that's what this was all about, is a drug as defined on Title 21, Section 321 of the United States Code. And they also had it for Texas Code also. Is it a drug under either Texas law or federal law? And that was the key to the case. Well, I thought, well, if that's the key to the case, then if we attack that, if we can find a flaw in that key element, then we can win this thing.
Right. So
I get the definitions, and I'm looking at them right now. 21 USC 321. You can run that into your Google right now. You just 21, the numbers 21 space USC space 321, and it will take you to Title 21 of the United States Code, Section 321, and its definitions generally. You can do this right now. You can see
I'm pulling
what
it
we're
up.
talking about.
All right, I'm seeing it.
All right, and then scroll down a little bit. You could take a look at subsection E,
Yeah.
which is person, includes individual, partnership, corporation, and association. Association is a fiction, corporation is a fiction, partnership is a fiction. An individual, as I'll show you in a couple of minutes, is an animal. All right?
Uh-huh.
They're giving you the definitions. The definitions are the law of the law.
Right.
If you can master the definitions, you can hold these people at bay. Go down to G, which is right, just below.
Okay.
Go to F, food. Subsection F, it says the term food means 1, articles used for food or drink by man or other animals. 2, chewing gum. 3, articles used for components of any such article. Well, what rang my bell? In fact, that is the phrase man or other animals.
Sure.
I actually saw it for the first time. I didn't see food initially. What I looked at was the definition for drugs, and I'll just read that. G, subsection 1. It says term drugs means articles recognized by the official United States Pharmacopoeia, official homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the United States or official national formula, blah, 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 blah. B, intended for the use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animals.
Yep.
And I read that and I thought, why, you damn fools, you don't even know how to write. Man or other animals means man is an animal.
Exactly.
If I said a horse or other animals, it makes perfect sense. A horse is a specific kind of animal of a group of creatures called animals.
Yep.
If I said a cow or other animals, make perfect sense. If I said a rock or other animals, that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
A rock isn't an animal.
Right.
The same thing is true with man. If I say man or other animals, it means that the people who wrote this deem man to be an animal in the same sense of a horse or other animals. Makes perfect sense. Man or other animals. Mm-hmm. They see us as animals. And I saw it the first time. I said, my God, I thought it was they were just so damn stupid that they didn't know what they were writing. You can't have that other in there. Man is not an animal. All right. But that's what they're presuming. Well, I kept on reading. Here's the next subsection C. It says articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. And I saw it a second time in the same definition of drugs. This is the federal definition of drugs.
That's wild.
All right, and they had it try twice in there. I said, oh my God, they really do see us as animals, as livestock. Why is that important?
Well, according to what we were just reading, like you said, animals are things.
Yeah, that's it. That's consistent with what we're saying. But here's where it becomes significant. Declaration of Independence. See, one of the things about this, I'm a student of the Bible. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a Bible scholar by any stretch of the imagination. But I've been reading the Bible.
Sure.
And I know that on the sixth day, according to Genesis 1:26 through 28, on the sixth day, God created man in his image, in God's image, and gave man dominion over the animals. All right? You may have 2 lungs, and the cow may have 2 lungs, but you are different from the cow by the fact that you are made in God's image.
Yep.
If you're not made in God's image, you're just an animal. All right? Now, what they've done, and they presume us to be livestock. They presume us to be animals. And where was I going with that? All right. In the Declaration of Independence, it says, we hold this truth to be self-evident that all men, not persons, okay, not individuals. This is a Simon Says, Mother May I.
Right.
Kind of deal. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, created by God.
Yep.
With certain that they are endowed by their Creator. Okay.
Yep.
With certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right, great, sounds wonderful. Except for one thing: it's for all men. It is not for animals. It's for created men. That says that they created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. These unalienable rights attach as an attribute of your creation,
right? Not
your birth. All right. 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. They're talking about persons. They're not talking about created men.
Yep.
They're talking about men that have been born, that have exited from the birth canal. All right? Now you're born. Virtually every animal is born. I mean, there's some things that, they have different kinds of reproduction for some creatures, but everything that's halfway, evolved, and I know that's a bad word, I don't want to mean to use that, but halfway complex.
Sure.
They are born. We are born. We are animals. And they treat us, and if you're an animal, you don't fall under the category of the idea that all men are created equal. All men are created. All created men are created equal. All right, created by God. Oh yeah, we're the ones that we have God's image, and if the argument we have God's image and therefore we are created men rather than evolved men, there could still be evolved men. All right, the government could presume that, but if you stand up and say, "No, I'm a created man. I am created by God," and they can't deny this. At least, they've got guns and clubs and they can do whatever they want. But they can't deny that you are a created man because it's one of the most important principles in the Jewish and Christian faith. If you're not a created man, you're nobody. All right? But it's a principle, a fundamental principle in the Christian faith that you must be a created man, not an evolved man. Evolved man has no meaningful rights. They can kick him around any way they want. And they presume you to be an evolved man. They presume you to be man or other animals. If you say, "No, I'm a created man, and my faith is guaranteed, protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States and by Article 1, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution," what are you going to do about that, Judge? You can't declare me to be an animal without violating my freedom of religion. You can't declare me to be an animal without establishing a false religion in this country and compelling me to be associated with it. Our religion is protected. First Amendment, Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution.
Yep.
Protect our religion. And this is when I brought this up. Again, this goes back to that case in Austin where I'm sued for $25,000 a day. I brought this up, and they had been sending us paperwork. Every 4 to 6 weeks, we'd get a nice fat piece of paperwork from the Attorney General of Texas.
So how'd you bring it up?
And it's I brought it up at one of the hearings. I brought it up in my paperwork for my defense when I said, okay, I read the original documents, that the key to this case is deciding whether colloidal silver is a drug as defined in such and such. And I essentially said, no, the key to the case is deciding whether or not we are members of we the people or if we are animals. And the court went dead silent. The prosecution went dead silent for something like 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
Right? We'd been getting paperwork from them basically every month, and now all of a sudden we didn't hear anything from them for 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
We got their attention. And then when they came back, they transferred the case over to Judge John K. Dietz, who was the chief administrative judge for Travis County, which is the seat of government in Texas. He's an important man. And he tried to scare us initially, and he tried to intimidate us, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to throw me in jail, and I'm going back to jail. But he didn't. And he brought us back into chambers, and he tried to settle the case and get us to agree. And we wouldn't settle even when they got down where the only thing we had to do is, what Ben had to do is if he would take a food manufacturer's license. All right? That would be it. We'd and change some of the advertising on his website. They'd let us go, no problem.
Wow.
We're being threatened with fines of $25,000 a day, and Ben wouldn't take the deal.
Well, so they went from 25.
No, I'm not taking a food manufacturer's license.
Wow.
Because it would put him under their jurisdiction.
Right.
And he had sense to know that. But they eventually just stopped the proceedings. They never said goodbye. They never said, that's it, we quit. They never said, you guys sure are smart. They never said anything. We're threatened again, fine. I don't think there's another man in the United States right now who can say, look, he had the government coming after him. They had invested 6 years and nearly $500,000 in pretrial investigations and pretrial hearings, and they just dropped it.
Wow.
This never said goodbye, nothing. They just stopped coming. Why? Because we're onto something powerful here.
Absolutely.
They think of us as animals. That's an act of genocide. Huh? That is an act of genocide, for God's sake. You know what they did in 1935? Nuremberg Act. Nazi Germany declared the Jews to be Untermenschen. Unter means under, mensch means man. They meant they something like subhuman, although I don't like the word human because that's also defined as animals. But in popular conversation, you could say subhuman. But legally, they declared the Jews to be Untermenschen. They declared the Jews to be animals. And once they did, it was completely legal to march the Jews, capture them, round them up, and march them into a concentration camp and subject them to mass murder and genocide.
Wow.
That definition laid before they said, oh, the Jews are Untermenschen. That's what laid the foundation for concentration camps and whatever happened after that. It was based on a definition that they declared the Jews to be animals. As animals, they have no meaningful rights.
Right.
Right? They're not made in God's image. They have no meaningful rights. Sure, we can execute them. Sure, we can do anything we want to them. Once we have that definition. The government has been running this definition of drugs and also definition of food. They've been running this since 1906. In the Food and Drug, in the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. They first used the phrase man or other animals in the definition of food and in the definition of drugs. The whole system is premised on the idea that you are nothing but livestock.
1906, huh?
1906, Pure Food and Drug Act.
Wow.
You can find it. You can find the text. It's something like, fourth, sixth paragraph section of that article. And you Google 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act.
All right, I'm checking it out.
They've been doing it to us for over a century. All right? So anyone who says, oh, this is crazy, the government thinks we're animals. No, it's not. And it's been going on miraculously for over a century. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm the first layman to figure out what this thing means from a spiritual perspective. In 2006, it'd be a century since they posted this. 2006 is when I figured this out. And this is the good Lord. I have no doubt the good Lord was just leading me into this. I mean, it was like he stuck my nose in the book and said, read this. I said, oh my God, they think of us as animals. They really do.
Right.
You know, we hear people talk about, oh, we're on the global plantation. No, we really are from the perspective of our would-be rulers. They see us as livestock. We are, from their perspective, on the global plantation.
Right.
It's not just an analogy. It is a reliable description of how they perceive the American people. And it's completely contrary to the fundamental principle in the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the third paragraph of the Declaration says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men.
Right.
They are telling us the purpose of government as envisioned by the founders at the state level. Declaration of Independence created the first 13 states, not states of the Union, states, individual states in the same sense that England was a state, Germany was a state, France was a state, not of the United States, but they were all states. They were single individual nations, nation states. All right, and that's what the Declaration of Independence created, and it said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That means they are axiomatic. They're the fundament, they're the foundation, the cornerstones on what this country is built. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men.
Yep.
All right?
Yep.
Now, the government doesn't want to secure our rights. They want to deprive us of our rights so they can kick us around and exploit us any way they want. And they can do that if they can simply get us to accept a definition, a self-definition, and say, are you the person?
Yep.
Referenced in these, but no, I'm not the person. I'm the man. I am the created man. All right? Now, not necessarily a get out of jail free card. But they dropped the case. Yeah, that case just disappeared, and they were threatening seven defendants, including me, with 25 grand a day. That's for each defendant. It's not 25 grand for all seven defendants. It's
Well,
25 grand for each of the seven defendants.
even if it was like you said, all of it still per day. I mean, that's just insane. And they to just drop it. Like you said, you're onto something.
I'm onto something. And the assistant attorney general who handled the case, his name was Raul Noriega. He told us at one point, he said he'd been there for 22 years. And incidentally, the state of Texas provided him with a Mercedes-Benz to drive around. Okay? He didn't have to, they couldn't just give him a Ford or a Chrysler or something. They gave him a Mercedes-Benz for personal transportation. He'd been there for 22 years. He said, I have never seen a judge work so hard to settle a case. He didn't understand what was going on. In my opinion, Raul Noriega never really understood what was going on here. But John K. Dietz was a brilliant man, and he was chief administrative judge for the county, for Travis County in Texas, and important man. He understood what was going on there, and he understood the issue we were raising, and he understood that if they want to get us, they're going to have to take us in front of a jury and explain to the jury that they think the jurors are nothing but livestock, and that their children are nothing but livestock, and their spouses and their parents are nothing but livestock, and they have no more rights than a chicken in a Tyson poultry processing plant. And he was going to have to, prosecutors were going to have to make that pitch. The prosecution didn't understand that, but Judge Dietz did. And when they couldn't get us to settle, they just had to drop it. They couldn't take it into a public forum and say, "Oh,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly." Could you imagine that being
all livestock?
Yeah, could you imagine that being a recorded case that was, I mean, precedent setting? Oh my God!
Even if it isn't exactly recorded at the trial court level here, I guarantee we would have appealed if things had gone against us.
Right.
And we would raise this argument at an appellate court, and if they ruled against us, we'd go to a higher appellate court, and we'd at least take a chance on trying to reach the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, they might not hear the case, and we might screw it up one way or the other, where we made some technical errors, but this was big. I believe this is the biggest story in the last 50 or 100 years in this country. The government, these are acts of genocide. There is an organization called Genocide Watch, and you can find it on the internet at genocidewatch.net or .org. I don't remember what the suffix is on this thing, but I think it's .net or .org.
.org, you got
Genocide,
it.
you know that?
I'm looking at it right now. It looks like it's both .org and .net. So
up on the top.
Okay.
I'm not there right now, but up at the top there's under the tabs at the top, on the top row.
I'm looking.
There's something up there that says documents, maybe. It's like the third one from the left, second or third tab from the left, and it's documents or sources or something like that.
So it says the International Alliance to End Genocide, and then it's got home, about us, genocide, alerts, updates, alliance.
Maybe about us.
All right, let's see.
Maybe about us. Check and see, do they have a document called 10 Stages of Genocide?
10 stages. There's 8 stages of genocide.
Okay, 8 stages of genocide.
Oh, wait, no, there's both, actually.
Okay, the 8 stages was what was there when we did this, when I was first researching this. They've amped it up to 10 stages of genocide, but nevertheless, this is a credible organization. These guys are serious, and they're not just some off-the-wall entity. If you look at 8 stages of genocide,
yeah.
Do you open that?
Yeah, I got it. I got it open right now.
Read the first one, just the headline.
Classification.
Okay, second one.
Symbolization.
Third one.
Discrimination.
Fourth one.
Dehumanization.
That's it. Dehumanization. Read the text under that heading.
All right. One group denies the humanity of the other group. Members of it are equated with animals, vermin, insects, or diseases.
Yeah.
Wow.
Equated with animals.
There you go.
This is probably this is quite possibly the single most, I don't know, significant website on genocide in the world. I don't know that to be true, but I think it might be. And they're telling us under item 4, dehumanization. Now, human is a bad word because human is also defined as animal. They don't understand this. But they do say if you call people animals, that's an act of genocide. And they also say, and our own law on genocide is consistent with this, that genocide does not require anybody to be killed. An act of genocide merely requires that you create circumstances where it's more likely that the members of a particular religion or a particular ethnic group or whatever, that they die. It's like giving blankets that have smallpox in them and give them to the Indians. Well, maybe the Indians die, maybe they don't. All right, but it is an act of genocide because it increases the probability that the Indians will die. Now, maybe nobody dies,
Right.
but it's still an act of genocide. When you start calling people animals, it increases the probability that they will die.
That is very true.
Yes. And it's part of the argument that I was prepared to make, or eventually prepared to make. I don't remember. I don't think I had this in the paperwork that I gave.
Well, let's look at just at two examples. At home, we have when the levees broke in New Orleans,
Yep.
right? And that's an at-home example of the people were treated like animals. They were not attended to. These people were not given full attention by the government of what they were needing at that time.
Not given substantive due process.
Yeah.
They get a form of due process, but all that is to check to see if you're wearing a U.S. tattoo on your butt like an army mule. All right? But if they can find any evidence that you're an animal and you've consented to be treated as an animal, then away you go.
Yeah.
You're going to have a bad time, and you're not going to get substantive due process. You're not going to get that law. That won't be available to you because there's nothing but lifestyle.
Well, and now, and you just caused me to think again back to the earlier part of the conversation, which was the idea of that we may be in a different form of law. And I had earlier pointed out that Weiss Concise was talking about that in rem jurisdiction stealthily operates in all criminal and civil jurisdictions because of the person idea, which is a thing, right? So. And you said earlier
Give you
that
another one.
Go ahead.
Give you another one that you should know about. Make
Please.
a note about.
Yes.
Administrative law. Are you familiar with? Oh God, I can't even think of the name. No,
I think you told me to get that book.
no, not a book. This is an encyclopedia.
Okay.
It's a massive encyclopedia, and I should be able to think of the name, but like I say, my memory is fading as I mature. And there's an encyclopedia that's commonly that's seen in the legal, profession, institution, and whatever. And I can't.
You talking about Black's Law?
No. That's just a dictionary.
Okay.
Encyclopedia. Damn, I can't think of it, and I really should be able to, but it's not coming to mind right now. It might come back in a couple of. But it has an article. It's probably 125 volumes. I don't know how long it is. But you go through the volumes and you find the one that deals with administrative law.
Yeah.
And they tell you in the first couple, they've got an article, if my recollection, it's something like 25, 30 pages long. But in the very first one or two, at least one and perhaps 2 pages, they tell you that administrative law is routinely referred to as the fourth branch of government.
Right.
Okay? Where is there a proviso for a fourth branch of government in the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of the state of Texas? There's 3 branches. There is the legislative branch, there's the executive branch, and there's the judicial branch.
Yep.
Right? That's all. Where do we get the fourth branch? What the fourth branch does, and they'll tell you this in this article on administrative law, and I really should have that name, and I just can't remember it right now. But they tell you that the administrative law combines the 3 fundamental powers of government under a single authority. What does that mean? It means the powers of the legislature, the powers of the executive branch, the powers of the judicial branch are combined together in violation of what?
Separation of powers.
Violation of that's exactly right. Separation of powers or division of powers is what they call it at Article 2 of the Texas Constitution. Division of powers. I don't think they can force you into an administrative tribunal. The presumption is that if you don't effectively object, you're going into administrative law where the judge, he exercises executive powers, judicial powers, what else? Legislative powers.
Right.
Right? He sits on the bench. I think when all three powers are combined together, I think you have a sovereign on your hands, and you are nothing but an animal being kicked around by a sovereign. He's exercised, there's no separation of powers. Well, it's another argument that has to be understood if you want to back these people off. I mean, what are they going to say? It tells you right there. Again, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of that encyclopedia. I want to say Find Law, but that's not it.
Is it online?
No, it's not online. You can find sections of it online.
Okay.
It's massive. It's a massive.
You're talking about corpus security?
Yeah, it's corpus juris secundum. That's what it is.
All right.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see.
You can look in there. You probably have to go to a law library to find it. I don't believe you can find it on the internet.
Right.
I could be wrong about that. And if you can, I'd like to know about it myself. But I'm not aware of that. That's a value. That thing costs several $1,000s.
I would love it.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, it is probably, I mean, there's a wet dream for you.
Well, we were just talking about that today earlier with my friend Jackie. We were talking about the fact that corpus juris secundum describes the idea of impropria persona. The definition of impropria persona is it was what was required in former pleading if one was to plead to the to object to the jurisdiction of the court, because if one was to take on a lawyer, you automatically admit to the jurisdiction of the court.
Yep. You mean, and when you say take on, you don't mean take on in a fight.
No, I mean hire one. Exactly.
That's exactly right. See, I don't think the attorneys operate at law. I think they may only operate, the licensed attorneys, I think they may only operate in equity. I don't know if that's true.
No,
it's a suspicion, but
I think you're 100%. And I don't know if it's. And again, I'm gonna question the form of law. I know that the trust law is involved in there somewhere. As far as what they're dealing with, like you said, it might be administrative. It might be.
You don't want administrative law. All right. And I think that's what most of it runs on. And if you can make an effective defense, denial, say, I do not consent to be processed by administrative process. I do not consent to be subject to administrative law. And you've got a constitution that you can point to that has division of powers or separation of powers. They're caught in an awkward position. They're going to have a very difficult time denying. They're going to probably say, case dismissed, get out of here.
Right.
And hope it doesn't get any bigger and nobody else hears about it. But I don't want administrative law, and I've told them in certain circumstances, I'll go to court with you all day, but you're going to take me to an Article 5 court. Article 5 is the judicial branch in Texas, in the Constitution of the state of Texas. I'll see you all day in Article 5 court.
Right.
But not administrative court where I have no meaningful rights.
Right.
All the power is in the hand of and he has executive, legislative, and judicial power all rolled up into one bundle for the administrator under administrative law. I'm not going to give him all that power. I'm not going to consent to that. And I think it has to be consensual. They don't advertise it. I haven't read that for a fact, but I think you have to be. It is
I think you're right.
that you have consented to be subject to administrative process.
I think you're right.
Oh, no.
Well, and here's the things that we discuss a lot in some other groups is so obviously we have the idea of going to court, right? Then that's the time when you're being asked to come to court and you're showing up, and then we're talking about what do you say, what do you do, what do you consent to, don't consent to. But you also have the idea of implied consent prior to court, right? So which benefits and privileges are we partaking in to maybe give them at least the presumed jurisdiction over this presumed person or whatever?
Well, one of the big presumptions that will bring you into this, are you using Federal Reserve notes to discharge your debt rather than pay it?
Right.
I mean, if you're using that, that's a benefit. I'm being allowed to discharge my debts with worthless pieces of paper.
Absolutely.
That's a benefit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely true.
But they don't have real authority over me. They're operating under just the color of law and this administrative law. They call it the fourth branch of government. Well, there is no fourth branch of government in my Constitution. Not in the federal Constitution, not in the state Constitution. I don't have any proviso for a fourth branch of government. No. But they call it repeatedly. They don't just say it once. They call it. They say it several times in Corpus Juris Secundum, the article on administrative law, in just the first 2 pages. They say it several times that it's a fourth branch of government, and they admit that they combine all 3 fundamental powers. It's a denial of separation of powers. I'm entitled to it. I'm one of the beneficiaries, clearly, of the Constitution of the state of Texas. I'm not absolutely. I don't know where I fit with the Constitution of the United States. I don't know for sure. I don't have the same level of confidence. I know I'm a beneficiary because I've used beneficiary of the Constitution of the state of Texas. I've used it as part of the reason that they dropped the case against me.
Okay.
They said, goodbye, you're out of here. They didn't even say that. That was it. We didn't get any more paper. It actually took another 6-8 months before they stopped completely. After they dragged us back into court, what are they going to do with us? And in fact, one of my favorite stories, and I don't know if I have a bunch of them, but I have more than one. In the process of meeting in Judge Dietz's private chambers, is to try to negotiate some sort of a settlement on this. Mm-hmm. And Judge Dietz had a degree in psychology before he ever went to law school. Really a brilliant guy, and he could have crushed us like tin cans. I know he could have, but he was he liked what we were doing, right? But he sat there in his private chambers with us and the prosecution, Attorney General of Texas and guy representing the Texas Department of State Health Services. And he said, the problem, nobody likes to enter into plea bargains. Because you always got to give up something you want. And he said, but people enter into plea bargains because they're willing to give up something they want because they're afraid that if they don't give up something, they're going to wind up getting slapped down hard and it's going to go worse on them.
Right.
Right? And then he looked at us and he said, but you guys don't seem to be afraid. And he looked at us, his eyes were wide. It was as if we had antennas on our head and our skin was green and we just stepped out of a UFO. I mean, he was astonished. He was amazed. He could not perceive. And he was trained in psychology before he went to law school. I mean, this is the kind of perception that he should be able to make. And he looked at us. He was astonished. We weren't afraid. In fact, we were. I was.
Right.
I was anxious. I didn't know what was going on. I was in over my head, and I didn't know how this was going to go. But I wasn't terrified. Okay? But at that moment, I said, "Oh no," because I knew what was going on. He was going to say, we're done negotiating this thing because you guys, you're not afraid. You're not going to reach a settlement." That was where he was headed. And I said, "Oh no. Oh, we're very concerned. We're very afraid of what's going on here."
You said it to him?
Yeah, I said it to the judge, and he looked at us kind of skeptically, and it allowed us to go on for another month or 6 weeks before we had another hearing.
Oh wow!
Another meeting, and the whole thing it was an astonishing event because we didn't know what we were doing. It's not like we were great litigators or something like that. But once I saw that man or other animals, I thought, I got these guys. I mean, the logic of it, I didn't know that I was right, but the logic of it was inescapable to me. And I thought, we're gonna run this thing.
Yeah.
And then things would happen. They had one day when we were supposed to go into court early on, and they'd give you to any judge that was available. And we had one day we were scheduled for Thursday or something. Mm-hmm. And we were scheduled to see Judge Smith. No, they didn't even give a schedule, tell us who the judge was. You wouldn't find out till you got to court. It might be Smith, it might be Jones, it might be Johnson. You don't know who it was. They had at least 5, maybe 10 judges ready to deal with a mass of people were showing up that day to be adjudicated. And 3 judges were out that day. One had a heart attack. One had maybe a stroke, I don't remember. One of them had emergency dental surgery. All right?
Huh.
And because there were 3 judges short, they canceled our trip to court that day. They couldn't prosecute everybody, and we were fortunate enough to be in the group, but they said, we can't get to you today, come back in a month. Well, that bought us another month, and the whole thing worked like that. We had the Assistant Attorney General at one point. He sat back and he says, I've been doing this. He says, I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've never had any of my emotions in court denied. Never in 22 years. And I get you guys. And he says, my emotions in the court have been denied 9 times. Right? And he couldn't understand it. He couldn't believe it. And he never did understand it. We had people praying. Ben had people praying. I won't say we, but Ben had, he was attending a Bible school or a Bible study group back at his home near Utopia, Texas. And he'd go there, and they had the woman that was running that thing, very spiritual woman. She would pray over a little bottle of virgin olive oil, and she would give that to Ben, and he would bring it down next time we had a hearing, and he would walk around the courthouse and anoint the 4 corners of the courthouse with virgin olive oil that had been prayed over and blessed by this woman. Right? And on one occasion, he was even managed to get it onto the chair that the judge sits on behind his desk. He managed to put a little spot of virgin olive oil down. Now, some people may say that's crazy, but I'm telling you, the good Lord's hand was in this all the way. I didn't understand. I don't mean that I always understood it. I said there were things that mystified me, but I know that was him that showed me man or other animals. He put my nose in that book.
I'm telling you.
Nobody's seen it in 100 years, to my knowledge. Nobody had previously seen it in a century. It had been on the books and realized what it meant. Right? This is the whole war on drugs is based on the presumption that the people are animals.
Right.
70% of the people in federal penitentiaries, last time I heard, and that's been a number of years, but 70% of the people in federal penitentiaries are there on drug-related crimes. Every one of those drug-related crimes are based on the presumption that they're nothing but livestock.
And they treat them that way.
Yes.
They treat them that way from beginning to...
They can kick you around. It's the reason why you think this is the land of the free, or at least it used to be. What happened? What happened? It was the land of free men made in God's image.
Yeah.
Now it's the animal. Now it's
now
it's not free men. It's evolved men. It's animal men. Just like the Nazis did with the Jews. First they declared them to be animals, and then they brought them into the concentration camps. That law was the foundation for whatever genocide took place in Nazi Germany. And nobody paid any attention to it. It came out in 1935, Nuremberg Act.
Wow.
Yeah. This is no small thing.
Well, and
the government of the United States for a century has been perpetrating genocide against the American people. Now, they haven't been killing us necessarily, but they've been killing us and finding us.
Mm-hmm. They're putting, like you said, enough men in jail, enough women in jail, taking people's homes. Not to mention just the black market that it creates by the war on the drugs.
Not just, and what do you get out of a black market?
Pure death and destruction.
Well, not only that, you get higher prices and big profits. You know, if drugs weren't illegal, they'd be so cheap nobody'd care about them.
Right.
What's the real addiction? Are people addicted to heroin, cocaine, or dollar bills? I mean, most of the people that get into it to a significant degree wind up selling it or paying high prices for it. Exorbitant prices. Why are the prices exorbitant? They have been in the past because the government declared them to be illegal. If they were legal, it's like pot.
Right.
You can
grow in your backyard then.
Yes. I lived, when I first moved to Dallas back in the 1980s, I shared a house with a couple of guys. And one of the guys, the guy that was in charge of the whole house, he was raising pot in the backyard. Now, I'm not, I've tried pot a few times in my life, but nothing. I've never bought any, so you can guess how much I've used in my life. So I've never paid for any pot. I've had people around, they're smoking it, yeah, I tried it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw these plants in the backyard, and they had to be 7, 8 feet tall behind a privacy fence. You couldn't see them from the outside. And silly me, I thought they were probably worth about $25 a piece. I found out that when he dried those things out and, rendered them ready for sale,
Right.
they're worth about $1,500 each. And I thought to myself, my God, $1,500 for a pot plant that consumes maybe 2 square feet of soil in your backyard.
Yep.
That is an irresistible temptation.
And purely because, like you said, because it's illegal.
Yeah, because it's illegal. It's a weed. I mean, there are people and times in this world where they paid people just to get those damn pot plants out of this marijuana plant. Get rid of them. They're worthless. They're just junk. Get rid of them. No, you make them illegal. All of a sudden, they're green gold.
Right.
Yeah, it's the prohibition that generates the extraordinary profits. Same thing with heroin, cocaine, the rest of that sort of thing. It's the prohibition. They're just, heroin, cocaine, grows out of the ground. It's not something made with a patent in a laboratory. It grows out of the ground. How much does it really cost to grow?
I mean, in my opinion, the fact that they've made marijuana illegal, I think that if people were able to smoke marijuana, you would not see the people using the harder drugs. I know that people talk about the gateway drugs and everything, but I don't think that's the case specifically.
Well, I don't know I don't know whether marijuana is a gateway drug or it's not a gateway drug. It didn't work that way for me.
Yeah, for me, I'm telling you, 30 years of use and never been the case.
Yeah. I think it's just arguments, but the arguments, and they say they're always here to help us. They're always here to protect us, but they are protecting us under the presumption that we're nothing but livestock.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, they can kick you around and kick you pretty hard based on that presumption. I don't know how far you went with your last confrontation over marijuana. Did you win, lose, or draw, or is it still ongoing, or where do you sit?
Just ended in December, and it ended up becoming a situation where I decided to. It was okay, like your story in regards to God moving in mysterious ways. I saw a very similar situation. I saw one county treat me very cordially, if you will, and then I saw the next county treat me absolutely like I was worthless as far as from the prosecutor's standpoint, and so I decided to go ahead and file my motions. He didn't want to talk to me. I said, okay, no problem. So I started filing my motions. I filed my different defenses, religious defenses, and different things. And I got denied at suppression hearing, denied this different stuff. But I continued to file my motions, and I knew that since I didn't have a lawyer, I could file whatever I want to file without I wasn't being an a-hole. I wasn't doing things just to give him a hard time. I was literally filing things that was like you said. I dug into that law. And I sent them various motions, and it caused them to have to continue the case. I didn't continue the case. They continued it on and on. The difficulty was in someone who was very close to me was unfortunately brought into the situation without having anything to do with the situation, and so in order to protect her, so to speak, I didn't push. I pushed, but I wouldn't have been an a-hole if she wasn't there. That wasn't the purpose. I was, gentle and loving and kind all throughout the entire thing, and smiles and love, to everyone, but stood up for my rights and asked them pressing questions up to the end. One of the questions that I asked them, and I'll just get to the point. I did plea bargain in order to save the situation for the woman who was involved, because I was able to get them to drop the case on her. But how God worked in mysterious ways was, and I'm not even going to get into my arguments, God works in mysterious ways, right before the week before, 2 weeks before the court case, the prosecuting attorney has a files charged against him by the Virginia Bar Association for prosecutorial misconduct, and he then relieved himself of his job. They continued the case. I'm sorry, they didn't. They assigned another prosecutor to the case, a young guy who, throughout the entire time, I've been very cordial and friendly with. Whenever I saw him, he immediately was willing to sit down and communicate. And I laid out what I was looking for, and got her off. Out of the charges, and pretty much a slap on the wrist.
Well, it's basic.
It's a win in my book for what it's
potentially
worth.
facing?
10 up to 10 years. Yeah, up to 10 years on each charge.
Well, then you were facing,
and felonies, and they moved them both down to misdemeanors.
Well, that's good, but you can see what we did with that. We never got to court on the deal. We had hearings, but we never got to a trial. Once I advanced the argument about man or other animals, I talked about it a little bit earlier, where I said we were getting a file from the government every 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly right now, but half an inch thick, coming in registered mail from people that are from the Attorney General of Texas, coming after you for $25,000 a day. It gets your attention, or such sort of thing. Once I filed that paperwork, my answer, where I raised this man or other animals issue, they went dead silent for 5 months. I think I told you that. All right. Well, it's evidence, so we did something. All right. We didn't know what we did exactly. We had a couple of lines of defense, but they did not want to see us. All right. They didn't want to see us after that. Judge Dietz tried to scare us a little bit in the beginning, and at one of his hearings, and later on, I was sitting down. This was a couple months later. All right. After we'd submitted that, I was sitting in the hallway in the courthouse. In the hallway, and I'm sitting down. There's a T, and there's a hallway that goes to the west and it goes to the east, and then it branches off and it goes to the north. And on the north arm of this T, there are the elevators to go up to the second floor and the third floor and so on. And Judge Dietz, I see him. I'm sitting down on one end of this thing, away from the elevators, and Judge Dietz is coming around the corner. It's kind of crowded. There's people in there and the rest of it. And he's going around the corner, and I know he's going to the elevator. He's got his robe on, the rest of that sort of thing. And he sees me sitting down the hallway. And I saw his face just kind of light up. And he came over. He stopped where he's going. He didn't go to the elevators. He came over to me. All right? Just amazed the heck out of me. All right? Here's a judge, chief administrative judge for the whole county. All right? He comes over there. He reaches out to shake hands with me. He takes my hand with both of his hands.
Nice.
He's just beaming at me.
Nice.
And I'm astonished. I mean, I couldn't be more amazed. And he's, hi, how you doing? Blah, 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 the rest of that sort of thing. Well, I'm,
Right.
But somebody up there liked us. Right? And Beats was really on our side. He tried to scare us. He tried to push us around. We wouldn't push. And that was just more dumb luck and the grace of God. That was not being particularly courageous or bold or anything like that. It was just, I don't know, but very strange. And to have the judge come up and shaking your hand, going out of his way. He could have just walked right around the corner, gotten on an elevator, gone where he was going. He went out of his way to come over and shake my hand. I was pretty much amazed. His heart was with the fox.
You touched him in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there are people sitting in the judiciary who behave every day like pure bastards, and they know they're railroading people.
Exactly.
But they presume that it's okay, it's morally offensive, but it's okay to railroad people if they're so dumb they don't really know what they're doing. They don't have a lawyer. They don't know what to do. They don't know when to motion or stand up or sit down or shut up or speak up. They take advantage of people's ignorance. And some of them, certainly not all, probably not a majority, I think they're troubled by it.
Right.
And they would like to see this racket end. And I think Dietz was in that camp.
Yeah, I know what you're
I
saying.
think Judge Dietz, he wanted, look, I want a better system. And he'd had trouble with the system. I mean, he was a candidate for the Supreme Court. He could have been there. He deserved it. He was a brilliant man, the rest of it. But he got crosswise with it was the Robin Hood school system, where they were taking money from some counties and giving it to other counties.
Mm-hmm.
He ruled against it, and they demoted him from his job as an appellate court judge to a chief administrative judge to the county of Travis. Still an important position, the rest of it, but he got slapped down for that, and he's persona non grata. We were not the first time that his heart was with the fox. Anyway, it was an extraordinary,
Well, I'm going to bring something up on that, and I need to get off here in a little bit, but I wanted to say one thing, which is you make a great point, which is God gave us free will. Not Thomas Jefferson. Ben Franklin was asked about the Constitution. He said, as long we have a republic, as long as you can keep it.
No, he said, did he say republic or did he say? I guess he did.
He said a republic. But so we're seeing this. Of course we're going to get mad when we see people deceive people and we see, fraud upon the people. And I think it is our responsibility as free people, as God's children, to really be vigilant for our rights.
Yep.
And like I know, that if you go to court and you don't bring up a certain argument, but the judge knows if you brought up this argument, you'd win.
Yes.
But he can't give you the argument. That's against the rules. I don't know.
Well, you would think so, but
I don't know.
People walk into court, expect to receive justice, and what they receive is technicalities.
Right.
The judge knows you're being railroaded, but if you don't have brains enough to know it yourself and be able to express it on the record, the judge says, no, screw him.
Right.
He's a dummy. Send him to prison. That's wrong.
Yeah,
you can't be jailed on the basis, at least you shouldn't be jailed.
Agreed.
Just because you're ignorant.
Agreed.
There's a right and wrong on this thing that in theory the judge might be able to get to. But they don't. They don't seem to do that. They just seem to, we're going to slap them around, throw them in a cage.
Well, I think we're seeing that up the entire chain of law in our society to where, right, to where you could volunteer into these quasi jurisdictions, you could volunteer into all these different forms of law and be administrated, regulated. We might not know what all of them are called or named, whether it be 14th Amendment or, as you said, Federal Reserve Note usage.
Do you have a driver's license?
Exactly, all these things.
Do you have utilities on your house? All right. There's a bunch of different devices that we suspect they use. They go down a checklist.
Well, you said earlier, resident.
To see if you have this device and this device and this device. Got a bank account?
Right.
Okay, they got you. Unless you can make an express denial and say, but if they have evidence that you have a bank account and you don't deny that certain things, you agreed to certain things when you took the bank account, you don't bring that up. No, who'd think of that? Nobody. Virtually no one. Got to deny having a bank account or deny that I agreed to be treated like an animal when I took the bank account.
Right.
Who's going to make that argument? It's like denying that I saw a UFO land on the roof of the house yesterday. Nobody's going to make that argument because there wasn't a UFO. But the government has systems, especially, when we talk about trusts, you talked earlier about having somebody had an express trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They also have implied trust relationships.
Right.
Where no one says the word trust.
Right.
And you are coming, if you are a defendant, you are presumed to be a fiduciary or trustee. You have obligations under the trust. No one names the trust because it's confidential. It enjoys certain privacy rights and the rest of it. They don't name you expressly as a beneficiary or as a trustee. They just kick you around. And you sit there and you wonder what's going on. They're treating me like a punching bag. Yeah. Because they think you're a fiduciary. They have implied that you are a fiduciary based on your conduct. Nothing you've done. Or maybe even just based on the plaintiff who says, he wasn't nice to me. All they have to do is essentially just, and the judge says, I feel your pain. And sir, we're going to throw you in the slammer for 6 months or a year. See how you like that? And you're wondering, what for? You don't get it.
Yep.
Because you were caught in an implied trust relationship which you did not deny and properly refute.
I believe it. I think you're absolutely right. And that's what seems to be going on in so many situations. We are being held once again to be the surety, the liable one.
Yep. Yeah. And you're held to be a rightless animal. If you're not a man made in God's image, you have no meaningful rights. You certainly don't have the unalienable rights declared in the Declaration of Independence. And they have no obligation to respect you as anything other than livestock. Let me do one more thing here before we bail out of this.
Sure.
For people who want to do a little more checking on these definitions, you can look at the Title I of the United States Code, Sections 8. All right? And you can find it on Google just by typing the numeral 1 space USC, that stands for United States Code, space 8. All right?
All right.
Are you going there, Greg?
I'm going there right now.
Yep.
All right, so I'm seeing person, human being, child, and individual as including born alive infant.
Yep. Take a look at subsection A.
All right.
It says, in determining the meaning of any act of Congress, or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the words person, human being, child, and individual shall include every infant member of the species Homo sapien who was born alive at any stage of development. What's that mean? It means that the words person, human being, child, and individual, every time you see them, according to this law, which is enacted in 2002, every time you see them, it means when they're talking expressly about every infant member of the species Homo sapien. But how many members of the species how many infants that are members of the Homo sapiens, of the species Homo sapiens, can you point to whose parents are not animals? Homo sapien is one of the names, that comes out of the system of taxonomy, where we have the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. Homo sapien is in the animal kingdom. This is a Title I, Section 8.
Wow.
Any act of Congress, any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the word person, human being, child, and individual include infant members of the species Homo sapien. That the parents of such a child have to be Homo sapiens. We're not having children that are declared to be Homo sapiens and that are the offspring of kangaroos. They have to be the offspring of people. All right? If the baby is a Homo sapien, you're a Homo sapien.
Yep.
All right? This is another one of their devices to presume that people are animals.
Yep. You're really you've discovered, like you said, something that was new, I think, in this, like you said, one more way that they're just I don't want to say dehumanizing, but just taking away the God-given rights.
They are depriving us of our God-given, unalienable rights. And these were the foundation of American exceptionalism. When they take away our rights we have under the Declaration of Independence by simply saying, you don't have those rights because you're an animal. This empowers the government enormously. I mean, they can ship us off to camp anytime they want, just like the Nazis did with the Jews. They declared them to be animals in the 1935 Nuremberg Act.
And we're hearing about these FEMA camps, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing these police shoot unarmed black men and I'm sure that's not just black men,
white
but
men too.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I know it's not just that. I know.
Shoot anybody that gets them.
But that's not even necessarily the point. What have the courts been doing every single time? Letting them go.
Slide.
Hell yeah, they're letting them slide.
Yeah. All right, and they're saying, we can't We can't judge what the cop does down here. Well, they don't have to. Because the victim in the situation is presumed to be an animal. All right, I shot your dog. I'm sorry about it. Here, let me give you 20 bucks, 50 bucks, 500 bucks for the dog. What's a dog worth? What about medical care? Drugs are defined as terms of man or other animals, and so are devices used in medicine. Medical devices are for man or other animals. All right? American medicine is all premised on the idea that, how much American medicine is there that doesn't involve either drugs or medical devices?
Yep.
And the answer is almost none of it. All right? Anytime you walk in, you're presumed to be livestock. Think about it. You get up there, say, oh, come on, Greg, climb up here on the operating table, and we're going to take a look and see what we can do with that appendicitis you're having. This guy is licensed to cut holes in you with a knife. How can you do that without any significant liability for a man who's made in God's image? But you can do it with animals.
Yeah.
American doctors right now are effectively functioning like glorified primate veterinarians.
Yeah.
Huh? And that's how they see you. And if you die, no big deal.
And that's how they are treating us with their prescription drugs and their pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And this will cause this side effect and this side effect. They don't give a shit.
It won't. We don't know, but we'll just try it. It makes money. The important thing is that we make money off of it. We'll sell it to these people, and if they die, screw them.
Through our I don't know if I want to say commoditization, but through our, like you're saying, converting us into this animal-like quality, and being used as just consumers, just a consumer, just to make money.
Yep.
They're just raping the people of all their rights.
Yeah. And one of the things I've told people for years, but it's worth mentioning again, at least I think it is. People think of the government, and you're paranoid about the government. And they go, oh my God, they have guns and clubs and pepper spray and the rest of that sort of thing. That's not the problem. We look at the government, we're frightened by the government because they have these guns, pepper spray, clubs to beat you over the head and the rest of that sort of thing. That's not what it's about. That's what we get fixated on. We get fixated on what we can see. But you are ensnared by the government with words. And if you want to avoid being ensnared by the government with invisible traps, invisible snares made out of nothing more than words, and maybe implications, you've got to master the language. You must become articulate. You have to become a student of the English language and a student of the law. And if you can do that, you can have a happy ending in some instances.
Very well spoken.
All right? But it's not about this. All of this is. There's a certain amount of government resistance involved in all of this, but it's not about shooting people, bombing people, killing people. It's about mastering the language and being able to read. When you see a phrase like "man or other animals," you've got to have your brain turned on. You guys, oh my gosh, they can't declare me an animal. Why not? Because Genesis 1:26-28 says all men are created. Let's create man in our image and give them dominion over the animals. Giving them dominion over the animals tells us that man is not an animal.
Right. Perfect.
All right? I can't be, and you can't call me an animal without depriving me of my freedom of religion, which is protected by the First Amendment and also Article 1, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution. But you got to know these things. And it's not just where you copy them. You copy them down, you parrot and rest. No, you got to know them.
Right.
You got to know this.
Well, and as you said, it's not just this one definition. You're talking about, so many times when people getting into these issues, if they really studied what's going on, they might find some answers that they're looking for.
They might find reason to be furious with their congressman, their senator, their federal courts, their state courts. It might be time to tell the SOBs, look, you are going to recognize, you are not going to presume me to be an animal. You are going to presume me to be a created man, not an evolved man. Evolved men are animals, evolution. That's animals. created man. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't believe in Genesis." Yeah, well, Genesis is protected by the First Amendment and by Article 1, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution. Evolved man is not protected.
Wow.
There's no part of the Constitution that protects him. All right? At least not with God-given unalienable rights.
Well,
It's got nothing going on.
And what do we see the 14th Amendment do? It gave freed slaves the privilege of citizenship. That could be, from what I'm assuming, privileges can be given and taken away, and they can be regulated at will.
Let me tell you another thing about privileges. Now, I'm not sure that the 14th Amendment creates privileges. I'm going to assume that's true for right now. But what is the difference between a privilege and a right?
Well, right is given by God. Privileges are given.
A lot of them, not all of them, but privileges are given by government.
Right, exactly.
If you take a privilege, I think it makes you a fiduciary. I think privileges in a trust relationship, and I don't know that to be true. Again, that's speculation. You can take it for, with as much salt as you think is necessary.
Well,
but privileges, and I've heard them say it about driving. Driving is a privilege.
Right.
It's not a right. It's a privilege. And who gives privileges? Government.
Yeah.
And I think they give them, and I think the presumption is if you take those privileges, you are presumed to be a fiduciary. All right? A trustee in a trust relationship. And they're the ones who go to jail. The beneficiaries don't go to jail. Unless they've done something outside the trust, way outside the trust and rest of it. But generally speaking, if anybody's going to jail, it's the fiduciaries. They have the duties. Beneficiaries just have the right of use and possession.
Well, and as you pointed out earlier, so you have that relationship, this constructive trust, this implied trust that they're creating by you taking this benefit, and then you have the original trust of the Constitution, which you are a beneficiary of.
I'm sure that you're a beneficiary of your state constitution. Right. I'm not absolutely certain that as an individual. I'd say you're a beneficiary of the Bill of Rights, but I'm not sure that you're a beneficiary of the Constitution. I think the principles in the Constitution are the states of the Union.
Interesting.
And they may be the beneficiaries, and you might not be. I don't know whether I'm a beneficiary of the Constitution of the United States or not. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Beneficiary of the Bill of Rights.
Right.
I'd say that. But it's a complex thing, and I've been looking at it since the mid-'90s, even the early '90s. It's a long time trying to figure this stuff out and get where you feel comfortable with it. And I get comfortable with a lot of it, but there's some of it that's still, clearly I have yet to figure out.
Well, you've definitely brought some great things to light, though.
Yeah, and good Lord shows me stuff once in a while. I mean, he lets me see. I don't see everything. I don't see perfectly, blah, 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 but sometimes I get to see.
Well, as my friend Jackie pointed out today, we all have our research and these little glimmers of truth that we've been shown. If we put them all together, we might be able to get a fuller picture and be able to do something to make some change, or at least to let the people know what's going on.
Well, the Declaration of Independence has something to that effect, where it says in the first paragraph, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them a decent respect for the opinions of mankind that requires them to declare the causes which impel them to the separation. That's one sentence, pretty amazing. That it's hard to grasp in a sense, but all they're saying is they did the Declaration of Independence just to say, look, we have put up with these SOBs, and we've put up with them, and they have screwed us around, and we have finally had enough.
Right.
And we're going to tell you they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and we quit. We're out of here. We're doing through the same thing when you talk about your friend Jackie and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Each of us finds pieces of this puzzle if you're inclined to look. They're there.
Right.
As we haven't reported them in a coherent where we all get in line and you tell I got these pieces of puzzles, and I stand there, these are my pieces of puzzle. Jackie stands there, these are her pieces of the puzzle, and the rest of us. We got to give them some kind of notice, it seems like. It's the same thing they did in the Declaration. We quit this game, and here's why. You guys aren't playing a straight deck. Understand? The cards, the dice are loaded, and the cards are marked, and you're not playing the game. Not fair.
Yeah.
So we quit. And that's kind of what we're doing. Folks like you and I and Jackie are digging into those reasons why we should be allowed to quit the game. The government says, no, you can't quit. You know, who was it? The people in the caravans coming up from Honduras or wherever, they claim they're oppressed. If they're oppressed, they wouldn't have been allowed to leave the country. You weren't going to get a caravan out of North Korea and take a caravan down to South Korea. You get in a caravan in North Korea, they'll kill you. I mean, in East Germany, the same thing. They built a wall that you couldn't get out. Wouldn't keep people from coming in. It kept people from getting out.
That's what Jackie and I were talking about today.
Real oppression won't let you go.
Hey, that's what Jackie and I were talking about today, is this wall that everybody's screaming for and saying we need to build. Jackie and I were talking about this part today, is are they keeping people out or are they getting ready to keep people in? Because they were getting ready to get clamped down on passports right now and the Real ID Act and all these things, and they're building a wall for a failing nation, possibly?
I don't know about that. I mean, the wall is going to be permeable. There'll be people getting to manage. They get through it one way or the other.
Right. Get
through it, get under it. You know, they'll find ways to defeat the wall to some degree. But this wall is symbolic. It's a way of telling people from Honduras, look, we don't want you. All right? If you want to enter this country illegally, we don't want you. It's a way of telling them, and it's a way of telling the American people that the government of this country actually gives a damn about this country. Our government should be protecting our borders. The wall is proof that the government will protect the borders, and the absence of the wall is evidence that the government doesn't want to protect the borders. Huh? They're in favor of people who commit crimes. Our government. And the wall is not just about keeping the Hondurans out, the Mexicans out, and the rest of it. It's about proving that this government, somebody up there, actually gives a damn about this country. That it may not be effective, but it's symbolic. But it's as a symbol, it may be highly effective. Yeah. So we'll watch and see.
It's definitely interesting.
The whole world's going nuts.
Oh man, Al, it's always a pleasure, brother.
Well, it's a pleasure for me too. I enjoy, anybody who listens, you can tell I enjoy talking and talking and talking. But thank you. I appreciate the invitation, the opportunity.
Well, I'm sure that people are gonna really enjoy hearing this, and I appreciate you taking the time to be able to discuss your experiences.
Yeah, this is some of this stuff works. For what it's worth, I won't even get into that. I just thank you for having me on the program, and
we'll do it again. We'll definitely keep in touch and make this a regular thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, brother. God bless.
God bless.
Until the next time. All right. Godspeed.
Godspeed.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Peace.